The distress signal cut through the cosmic silence like a knife through silk. Captain Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the holographic display flicker with alien symbols that the translation matrix was still struggling to decode. "What do we have?" she asked her communications officer, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. Lieutenant's fingers danced over his console, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's coming from the 442 system, Captain. The signal is..." It's desperate. They're calling for immediate assistance against something they're calling the Devourers. Frowned, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for barely 5 years, ever since they discovered faster-than-light travel and stumbled into a universe teeming with intelligent life. Most species had welcomed them cautiously, though some had been openly horrified when they learned that humans came from a Class 12. Earth, with its crushing gravity, violent weather, predatory ecosystem, and radioactive star, was considered one of the most hostile planets capable of sustaining complex life. The fact that not only had life evolved there, but had actually thrived and developed technology, had made humans something of a curiosity among the galactic community. "Who sent the signal?" asked. "The Confederation, Captain. They're one of the peaceful trader species, herbivores, if I remember correctly. Their entire civilization is built around art, philosophy, and commerce." Nodded grimly. She'd met a delegation once. They were tall, graceful beings with translucent skin and large, gentle eyes. The idea of them facing any kind of military threat was absurd. They didn't even have a word for war in their language until they'd met humans. "Set course for 442, she ordered. "Maximum warp." Captain, her first officer commander, stepped closer and lowered his voice. "Shouldn't we contact command first? Get authorization?" His jaw tightened. "By the time we get authorization, those people could be dead. We're the closest ship and they called for help. That's enough for me." As the Vengeance leaped into warp, couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than just one distress call. They weren't the type to panic easily, and if something had scared them enough to broadcast an emergency signal across half the galaxy, it was serious. 3 days later, they dropped out of warp at the edge of the 442 system and felt her blood run cold. The system was a graveyard. Where there should have been bustling trade stations and the elegant spiral cities they were famous for, there was nothing but debris. Massive chunks of metal and organic material drifted in the void, some pieces still glowing from whatever had torn them apart. "Jesus Christ," whispered, "what happened here?" Captain's voice cracked slightly. "I'm picking up a weak signal from the 4th planet. It's coming from underground." "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was barely recognizable as. Where their normal speech was musical and flowing, this was ragged and desperate. "Please, anyone, we are the last. The Devourers came without warning, our fleets, our cities, all gone. We managed to get a few thousand survivors into the deep shelters, but they're breaking through. The acid, they use some kind of acid that eats through everything. We have maybe hours left before." The signal cut to static. Stared at the dead transmission for a long moment, her mind racing. Whatever had done this was still down there, hunting the survivors like animals in a hole. "Captain," her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, spoke up from his station. "I'm reading massive energy signatures on the planet's surface. Whatever's down there, it's big, and there are a lot of them." Walked to the center of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. Every instinct screamed at her to call for backup, to wait for a proper fleet. But she could hear the terror in that voice, could imagine those gentle beings huddled in the dark while monsters prowled above them. "Battle stations," she ordered. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. Target those energy signatures." Captain grabbed her arm. "We don't know what we're dealing with. This could be a trap, or there could be survivors mixed in with hostiles. We should." "There are people down there dying, people who called us for help." His voice was steel. "They have been nothing but good to us since we joined the Council. They shared their art, their music, their culture. They welcomed us when half the galaxy thought we were dangerous primitives." She turned to face her crew, seeing the mix of fear and determination in their eyes. These were humans, children of a world that had tried to kill them every day of their evolution. They understood what it meant to fight for survival. "I know we're just one ship," she continued. "I know the smart play is to run and get help, but by the time that help arrives, there won't be anyone left to save. These Devourers, They've already wiped out an entire system. If we let them finish the job here, who knows where they'll go next? Jackson looked up from his console. Captain, I'm getting a clearer picture of what's on the surface. The energy signatures. They're not ships. They're biological, and they're huge. I'm reading creatures the size of skyscrapers down there. Felt a chill run down her spine, but her resolve didn't waver. Then we'll kill them all. The bridge fell silent for a moment as her words sank in, then straightened, his hesitation gone. Orders, Captain. Signal command. Tell them we've found evidence of a hostile alien species that has completely destroyed the system. Tell them we're engaging to protect survivors and gather intelligence. Moved to her command chair. Then charge all weapons and prepare to show these devourers why you don't mess with a species from a. As the Vengeance moved into attack position, thought about all the times other species had looked at humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. They'd always been polite about it, but she'd seen it in their eyes. The knowledge that humans were different, that they came from a world that would have killed any other species. Today, she thought grimly, they were about to find out exactly what that difference meant. Firing solution locked, Captain, Jackson reported. Fire. The Vengeance's main batteries erupted in synchronized fury, sending streams of plasma and kinetic rounds screaming toward the planet's surface. The first salvo lit up the night side of the world like a second sun, and through the tactical display, watched the massive energy signatures scatter and move. They were fast, terrifyingly fast for something that size. They're moving to avoid our fire, Jackson reported, his voice tight with concentration. These things are smart, Captain. Then we'll have to be smarter, leaned forward in her chair. Launch all fighters. I want a full reconnaissance sweep of the surface. Find me those survivors and find me a way to kill every single one of those monsters. As the hangar bays opened and dozens of human fighters streaked toward the planet, allowed herself a grim smile. The Devourers had made a mistake when they chose to hunt in this system. They'd stumbled into the territory of a species that had been apex predators long before they'd ever left there. And now they were about to learn why the rest of the galaxy was right to fear the children of Earth. The first fighter wing reached the planet's atmosphere just as the sun crested the horizon, revealing a landscape that made even hardened human pilots pause in horror. Mother of God, whispered Flight Leader Amy Torres as her squadron descended through the clouds. Command, you need to see this. The surface of what had once been a beautiful world was now a nightmare of twisted metal and organic corruption. The elegant spire cities that had once stretched toward the sky were gone, replaced by massive, pulsing structures that seemed to grow from the ground like tumors, and moving between them were the Devourers. Torres had seen a lot in her 15 years as a pilot, but nothing had prepared her for this. The creatures were indeed the size of skyscrapers, but that description didn't capture the true horror of them. They moved like living buildings, their crystalline carapaces reflecting the alien sunlight as they prowled through the ruins. Hundreds of tentacle-like appendages writhed from their undersides, secreting the acid that had dissolved the defenses. Jesus, they're everywhere, reported her wingman, Lieutenant Park. I count at least 50 of the big ones and something else. Smaller ones, maybe the size of tanks. Torres banked her fighter around one of the organic spires and nearly crashed as she came face to face with a devourer that had sensed her approach. The thing reared up on its hind sections, revealing a mouth that could have swallowed her entire fighter. Rows of crystalline teeth glittered in its maw, and she could see digestive acids dripping from its jaws. Engaging hostile, she shouted, squeezing the trigger on her plasma cannons. The weapon's fire struck the creature's carapace and exploded in brilliant flashes, but when the light faded, the monster was still there, seemingly unharmed. The plasma that should have melted through armor plating had simply splashed off its natural defenses like water. No effect. Repeat, plasma weapons are ineffective against their armor. The Devourer's response was immediate and terrifying. Its mouth opened wider, and a stream of acid launched toward her fighter like a liquid missile. Torres pulled hard on her stick, feeling the G-forces try to crush her into her seat as she spiraled away from the attack. The acid missed her by meters, but where it struck the ground, it ate through solid rock as if it were paper. All fighters, this is Torres. These things are heavily armored and they spit acid. Keep your distance and try kinetic rounds. The battle that followed was unlike anything in the tactical manuals. The human pilots darted between the massive creatures like insects around giants, peppering them with fire and high-explosive missiles. The kinetic rounds seemed to have some effect, cracking the crystalline armor in places, but it was like trying to kill an elephant with a pea shooter. Meanwhile, aboard the Vengeance, Captain watched the tactical display with growing concern. Her fighters were giving their all, but they were barely scratching the surface of the enemy forces. Captain called out urgently, "I'm picking up that underground signal again. The survivors are broadcasting on a secure channel." "Put them through." This time the voice was clearer, though still thick with fear. "Human vessel, this is Research Director of the Deep Science Station. We have been monitoring your attack on the Devourers, your weapons. They are having minimal effect." "We've noticed," replied grimly. "How many survivors do you have?" 3,212 souls in our deepest shelters, but the Devourers, they are learning. Their acid is becoming more concentrated. Our barriers will not hold much longer." Felt the weight of those lives pressing down on her. Over 3,000 beings, counting on humanity to save them from extinction. "Research Director, what can you tell us about these creatures? How do we kill them?" There was a long pause before responded. "We have been studying them since the invasion began. They are not native to our galaxy. Our deep space monitors detected their approach 3 cycles ago, but we did not recognize the threat until it was too late. They appear to be a bioengineered species designed for one purpose: consumption." "Bioengineered," leaned in closer to the communication station. "Yes, Commander, their armor is not natural evolution. It has been specifically adapted to resist energy weapons. But our analysis suggests vulnerabilities. They process matter through specialized organs in their core sections, if those organs were damaged. They'd die, finished. The question is how we get through that armor to reach them." "Captain," Jackson interrupted from tactical, "I'm reading energy buildups in the larger creatures. I think they're preparing for some kind of coordinated attack." Turned to see the tactical display light up with hostile contacts. The Devourers were moving, converging on the underground shelters where the survivors hid. Worse, the smaller ones were burrowing, their acid eating through solid rock as they tunneled downward. "How long until they reach the survivors?" she demanded. "At current rate of descent, maybe 2 hours, Captain." 2 hours, stared at the display, her mind racing through possibilities. Conventional weapons weren't working. The creatures were too well armored, too numerous. But there had to be something. "Research Director," she called. "You said their armor was designed to resist energy weapons. What about kinetic impact? Massive kinetic impact?" I am not certain. The armor is designed to disperse energy, but enough physical force." Turned to her navigation officer. "Lieutenant, plot a trajectory for the largest concentration of hostiles. Factor in planetary gravity and atmospheric entry." His face went pale as he realized what she was suggesting. "Captain, you're not seriously considering." "A kinetic bombardment run. We take the Vengeance into the upper atmosphere and drop tungsten rods directly onto their positions. The kinetic energy from orbital velocity should punch right through their armor." Stepped forward, his expression grave. "Sarah, that's incredibly dangerous. If we miscalculate the entry angle, or if those things have anti-ship weapons we haven't seen yet." "Then we die trying," said simply. "But if we don't do something right now, those survivors are dead anyway, and these Devourers will be free to spread to other systems." She looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had carried humanity from the caves of Earth to the stars. They were scared, but they were ready. "All fighters return to base immediately. We're going in." As her pilots raced back to the ship, felt a strange calm settle over her. This was what humans did. When faced with impossible odds, when conventional wisdom said to retreat and regroup, they doubled down and found a way to win. The Vengeance turned toward the planet, her engines burning bright as she dove into the atmosphere. The hull began to glow with re-entry heat, and could hear the stressed groaning of metal as they pushed the ship beyond its normal operational limits. "Kinetic bombardment systems armed and ready," Jackson reported. "Target the largest concentrations first. We need to thin their numbers before they reach the survivors." The ship shuddered as the first salvo of tungsten rods launched from their magnetic accelerators. Each rod was simple in design, just dense metal shaped for maximum penetration, but when accelerated to orbital velocities, they hit with the force of nuclear weapons. The first impacts lit up the planet's surface like falling stars. Where the rods struck the Devourers, the results were immediate and devastating. The kinetic energy punched through their crystalline armor like it was glass, and the creatures' death screams echoed across the communication frequencies. "Direct hits," Jackson shouted, "multiple targets down." But the Devourers weren't passive victims. As the second salvo launched, the surviving creatures began to move with coordinated precision. Streams of acid arced up from the surface, and realized with growing horror that they were aiming for the Vengeance. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered, but they were committed to the attack run now. The ship was too deep in the atmosphere to change course quickly. The first acid stream missed by hundreds of meters, but the second came closer. The third struck their port shield emitter, and alarms began blaring across the bridge as the corrosive substance ate through their defensive systems. "Shield generators failing," reported the engineering officer. "That acid is unlike anything we've encountered. It's breaking down the metal on a molecular level." Gritted her teeth as more acid streams launched toward them. The Vengeance twisted and rolled, using every trick her pilot knew to avoid the attacks, but there were too many creatures below, and they were learning to lead their targets. "Final salvo ready," Jackson called out. "Fire everything." The last of their kinetic rounds screamed toward the planet's surface, targeting the creatures that had almost reached the underground shelters. The impact sent shockwaves across the landscape, and through the tactical sensors, watched as dozens more Devourers fell. But it wasn't enough. There were still too many, and now the Vengeance was wounded, limping through the atmosphere with failing shields and acid eating through her hull. "Get us out of here," ordered. "Emergency ascent." As they clawed their way back toward orbit, leaving a trail of debris and vapor behind them, realized that they'd bought the survivors time, but hadn't solved the problem. The Devourers were still there, still digging toward the shelters, and now they knew that the humans could hurt them. The real war was just beginning. The emergency beacon had activated reached Earth command just as the Vengeance limped into high orbit, her hull with acid burns and her crew exhausted from the fighting. Admiral Harrison's response was swift and decisive. "All available vessels, emergency deployment to 442. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile species has completely destroyed the Confederation. Captain's ship is engaged with survivors on the ground." What followed was the largest human military mobilization since the Siege of Titan. Every battleship, carrier, and destroyer that could reach the system was dispatched immediately. The UES Retribution, humanity's dreadnought, led a fleet of 47 vessels through hyperspace toward what would become known as the Battle of Prime. But couldn't wait for the fleet. The acid-eating creatures below were less than an hour from breaching the final shelter barriers. "Captain," research director's voice came through the communications array, weaker now but still determined. "We have been analyzing the tactical data from your attack. The kinetic bombardment was effective, but we believe there is a more efficient solution." Straightened in her damaged command chair, "I'm listening." "The Devourers operate through a hive mind. We have detected quantum entanglement signatures linking all the creatures in a single network. If we could locate and destroy their central coordination node, the whole swarm would collapse," finished, his eyes lighting up with understanding. "Precisely, but the node, it is not on the surface. Our deep sensors suggest it is approximately 2 kilometers beneath the primary infestation site in what was once our capital city." Stared at the tactical display. 2 kilometers underground, surrounded by an unknown number of hostile creatures, protected by the same nearly impenetrable armor that had shrugged off their best weapons. "Even if we could reach it," she said slowly, "we don't have anything that could punch through 2 kilometers of solid rock and whatever defenses they've built down there." "Actually, Captain," Lieutenant spoke up from his station, his voice hesitant, "there might be a way. The system has an asteroid belt with significant metal ore deposits. If we could capture one of the larger asteroids and accelerate it to sufficient velocity." Felt her blood run cold as she realized what he was suggesting. "You're talking about cracking the planet." "Not the whole planet," corrected quickly. "Just the affected region. A precisely calculated impact could punch through to the target depth while minimizing damage to the rest of the world." "The survivors," protested. "Even if they're in deep shelters, the seismic shock could kill them all." His voice came through the speakers with surprising calm. "Commander, we are dead already. The barriers will fail within the hour, and the devourers will consume what remains of my people. If there is a chance, however small, to stop these creatures from spreading to other worlds, we accept the risk." Closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. 47 human ships were racing toward them, but they wouldn't arrive for another 6 hours. In that time, the devourers could finish off the survivors and potentially spread to other systems. "Do it," she ordered. "Find me an asteroid. Jackson, recalibrate our remaining weapons for precision mining operations. We're going to need to carve that rock into the perfect kinetic weapon." What followed was 3 hours of the most dangerous engineering work in human history. The Vengeance, despite her battle damage, maneuvered to the asteroid belt and began the delicate process of capturing a metallic asteroid roughly the size of a city block. Using their remaining plasma cannons as mining tools, they carved away excess material until they had a dense, aerodynamic projectile. Meanwhile, the Devourers had broken through the outer shelter barriers. The survivors were now trapped in a single reinforced chamber, listening to the sounds of acid eating through their final defenses. "Asteroid secured and shaped for optimal penetration," reported. "Trajectory calculated for maximum kinetic impact on target zone." Watch the tactical display as they maneuvered their makeshift projectile into position. One shot. If they missed, if their calculations were wrong, they would have doomed the survivors for nothing. "Research Director," she called, "are your people ready?" "We are in the deepest chamber, surrounded by every shock absorber and structural support we could install. Our fate is in your hands now, Captain." Took a deep breath. Jackson released the asteroid, full accelerator burn. The Vengeance's engines screamed as they pushed the massive rock toward the planet. It started slowly, but as it fell into the gravity well, it began to accelerate exponentially. By the time it hit the upper atmosphere, it was moving at over 40 kilometers per second. The impact was visible from orbit. A flash of light brighter than the system's sun erupted from the planet's surface, followed by a shockwave that rippled across the continents. The asteroid punched through 2 kilometers of crust like a bullet through paper, creating a crater that could be seen from space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the energy signatures of the Devourers began to flicker and fade. One by one, the massive creatures stopped moving, their hive-mind connection severed by the destruction of their central node. "Devourer movement has ceased," Jackson reported, his voice filled with amazement. "All hostiles are down." Slumped in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Try to raise the survivors." Long seconds passed before his voice came through the speakers, weak but alive. "Captain, we are alive, badly shaken but alive. The seismic shock was incredible, but our emergency shelters held. And the Devourers, they just stopped, all of them simultaneously." Relief flooded through the bridge crew. They had done it. Against impossible odds, with a single damaged ship, they had stopped an invasion that had wiped out an entire civilization. But their celebration was cut short as new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. "Captain," called out urgently, "I'm detecting multiple hyperspace signatures, large fleet formation approaching from galactic core direction." Stomach dropped. More Devourers. "No, ma'am, these are showing as human transponder codes. It's Admiral Harrison's fleet." As the 47-ship human armada dropped out of hyperspace, realized she was about to have a very difficult conversation with her commanding officer. Destroying an asteroid and essentially performing orbital bombardment on an allied world wasn't exactly standard procedure. Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the main screen, his weathered face stern as he took in the sight of the damaged Vengeance and the planet below. "Captain," he said slowly, "I'm reading massive kinetic impact signatures on the planet's surface and evidence of sustained combat operations. Care to explain why there's a crater the size of Manhattan on Prime?" Straightened in her chair. "Sir, we encountered a hostile species that had completely overrun the system. They called them Devourers. They were bioengineered creatures with highly advanced armor operating through a hive mind. The only way to stop them was to destroy their control node with kinetic bombardment." Harrison studied her for a long moment. "And the survivors?" 3,212 souls safe in underground shelters, sir. We saved them all." The Admiral's expression softened slightly. What you did here, it was reckless, dangerous, and completely outside of normal operating procedures. Felt her heart sink. Court-martial probably, end of career definitely. However, Harrison continued, it was also brilliant, brave, and exactly what we'd expect from a human officer facing impossible odds. The Galactic Council is already calling this the most significant military victory in recorded history. You've probably prevented these devourers from spreading across the entire galaxy. As rescue ships moved toward the planet to extract the survivors, reflected on the day's events. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 5 years, but today they had proven something important. When the other species of the galaxy faced extinction, when their peaceful ways and advanced technology weren't enough to save them, they called for the children of Earth. The species that had learned to fight and survive on a planet that tried to kill them every day. And when that call came, humanity answered with the full fury of a species that had never learned to surrender. The Devourers had made a crucial mistake. They had threatened innocent people in the territory of a species that had spent millions of years learning to be the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. As the Vengeance finally docked with the fleet's flagship for repairs, smiled for the first time in days, the Galactic Council would never again question whether humanity deserved a place among the stars. They had earned it with blood, courage, and the unshakable human conviction that no one, no matter how powerful, would be allowed to hunt the innocent while humans drew breath. The age of human protection over the galaxy had officially begun.